If you're caring for an older parent or loved one, you already know there is absolutely nothing that can prepare you for this. You're cruising along, and then there's one phone call, or there's a fall, or there's a late night emergency, and suddenly you're rearranging your entire life, or you're scrambling because you can't find that document. What's that password? What did she want? I should have been better prepared. And that's when you realize chaos doesn't wait until you're ready. The truth is, most of us fall in to being a caregiver. We don't plan for this. Today's conversation on the Advanced Adulting Podcast is about that. It's for people in that space, and it's to give you an idea of how to be prepared before chaos hits and what to do when it all hits the fan. My guest is Paul Richardson of Tumbleweed. Paul's been a caregiver since he was 12 years old, but it's only a couple of years ago that he actually just realized and acknowledged, yeah, that's what I do. He's lived through the chaos. He's lived through the turmoil and trying to keep it all together for everybody, even at a very early age. Now, a leader in the caregiving space, he's built a solution to help people put everything together and plan ahead and deal with chaos when it comes, so you're not scrambling, so you can be present and in the moment. We're going to be digging into that exact moment when you realize that maybe you've become the parent and it's they who need you. We're going to be talking about family dynamics, resentment. We're going to be talking about how you can actually talk to your family members, your siblings, and even your loved one before a crisis or chaos hit. And you're going to get some solutions on what to do so you're not scrambling when life comes at you. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Paul Richardson of Tumbleweed. I'm Bradley Richardson, and this is Advanced Adulting. Paul Richardson, welcome to Advanced Adulting.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, again, we're not brothers, but we got the same last name going.
Yeah, we do. Same last name and similar pain point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Except you got the hair apparently, so and then genetic thing. No, you're right. The pain point is the same for not just us, but a lot of people right now who are in, regardless, but especially those people kind of in what we call the sandwich generation, people who are in this demographic, largely Gen X. You want to call it 45 to 65 plus, but it's also happening earlier too. This idea of caregiving. And that's one of the things I'm excited to talk to you about. And you have a lot of experience with this personally and professionally. I think one thing that in our conversations, you'd said at one point that you'd been a caregiver for 30 some odd years, but you only realized it in the past 2. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So it's interesting. Obviously, building a startup at Tumbleweed, very focused in supporting the family caregivers, the sandwich generation. To your point, right now, a lot of the folks that are sandwiched are Gen X. I'm a Zennial, right? Like I'm on the border of Gen X millennial, so I'm an elder millennial.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably a little bit younger than some folks, but yeah, it's been interesting. So building Tumbleweed and kind of reflecting on my own journey, it was kind of honestly a revelation, not even 2 years ago, where I was like, I've been a caregiver since I was 12, probably even earlier than that, because I'm the eldest. My mom was a single mom. My mom was with, severe mental illness. She's been disabled now for over 10 years, kind of by standards, but she's been battling mental illness and institutionalization since I was 12. And so as the eldest and with a single parent, who's raising you someone's got to step up. Right. And so I would take care of my younger sisters. She would be in and out of hospitalizations. When she would get back often, or even before, with severe mental illness, she would be in bed sometimes for weeks or even months on end. And so just, I would feed her. I would try and get her to kind of do what I now know are activities of daily living, like showering, doing things to kind of help with self-care. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience. And I was like, oh, no wonder I feel like I've had so much on my plate for so long.
You make a great point that I think a lot of people, if they're experiencing it, they know it, but we don't talk about it. We think of caregiving. I think for a lot of people, when you mention the word caregiving, we think of someone elderly. We think of an older parent or grandparent. But caregiving, I've found the more that I've been in this is situations like yours, where you're dealing with someone who is either chronically ill, they are mentally ill, They're incapacitated. That is falling upon kids younger and younger, like you did. It's falling upon spouses, siblings, and others. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people aren't aware of. That caregiving isn't just for taking care of your old person at all.
No, or a young person. And Bradley, it's
Hmm.
funny. I have this analogy that I've started kind of sharing with people to see how it resonates. So I'm going to kind of use a little bit of a story. Let's assume you and I work together in an
Yeah.
organization. And let's say on my desk, I had two pictures, one with me and a family with young children,
Hmm.
and one with me, maybe with an older person, like my mom.
Hmm.
If you were walking by my desk, people, when you would see a coworker with children or even young adults, there's an automatic assumption and realization, caregiver, right?
Yeah.
Parent giving care. It's very natural. However, I have yet to see, and I've talked to a lot of people, where if you see a picture with someone with an older person, where the average person realizes, oh, I wonder if they're a caregiver for that person,
Hmm.
because it's just not an assumption. That's why it's kind of called the silent workload, right? So many of us that are in the sandwich generation, there is more conversation happening, but a lot of people, if they're not doing it themselves, would have no idea how
Hmm.
much care it takes to help support our aging population.
Well,
And
the other
so
thing
I just
I
wanted to
think,
share that.
no, I think that's a great point. And let's jump into it. Let's talk about the workplace, because I think that's something where the workplace is evolving at such a rapid
Yeah.
pace in so many different ways. I mean, my background as a headhunter, shows in how people get jobs, how
Yeah.
people keep jobs, where they work, all of that. But
Yeah.
this idea of caregiving, there's some things that it seems like to be the last area that people just don't talk about. You'll talk about damn near anything about your
Yeah.
personal life at work now. The lines have been blurred, but people are very reluctant to say that they're a caregiver for an older parent. And you're right. People, if you have a sick child or
Hmm.
a child with a disability, people understand that. They'll talk about that. But the idea of having to take time off work
Yeah.
or expenses or anything like this to care for an elderly parent or loved one. Um, People look at it as a serious career liability now, don't they?
Mm. Yeah. In a lot of situations. And I think, you know, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I do think that there's an opportunity for this to become more of a common conversation in the workplace.
Hmm.
But, I don't know about you, Bradley. I won't assume. But again, in my situation, I didn't even realize I was a caregiver for 30 years, right?
Hmm.
And that's a unique story. But when I talk to a lot of folks and customers and partners and employee resource groups and affinity groups, right? Because I do a lot of conversations in different spaces, so often they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that that's what I was living. And so it's almost like they don't even have the language
Right.
yet to share with their coworkers what they're navigating. But
Hmm.
once they start to share, then it's oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I mean, the
Oh,
data's out there. Right now,
oh,
1 in 4 working people are caring for an aging person.
mhm.
1 in 4. So that's
Yeah.
25% of our population.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that you're not alone, but you think you are, and it's
Yeah,
funny in
you
those
feel very alone.
yeah, and it's those conversations though. It's when one person finally
Yep.
opens up the floodgates on that
Yep.
and is brave enough. You don't even say vulnerable; it's just brave enough to say, "Hey, man,
Yeah.
here's what's going on. Here's what's going on with my why I'm stressed or what I'm having to deal with." It's remarkable how many people go, "Oh yeah, me too," and
Yeah.
then it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay." This burden has been lifted and people are free to talk about that, but yet people still think about what's it going to do to my career. I mean,
Hmm. Yeah.
competition's tough. Is
Yeah.
this going to be a strike against me?
Yep.
And I think it's interesting too. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I know that with a lot of companies, larger companies, in
Hmm.
most cases, who have an ERGs, they're doing a lot for. Uh, I do. I have a lot of. I have a big female audience. I've also done
Hmm.
a lot of
Yep.
podcasts and
Makes
things
sense
in
in
that
this
area.
space. Absolutely.
It
Yep.
is,
Yep.
and I also have done a lot of conversations and interviews and podcasts with people in the menopause space, and they're making
Interesting.
great strides
Yeah.
with incorporating menopause care as
Yep.
part of a benefit, and companies are aware of it now. And yet, it seems that caregiving is really still way behind the times and not offered as much, or if done so, almost like lip service than rather than anything with any teeth. What are you seeing out there that companies are doing to really help caregivers at work?
I mean, I think probably the first place I do usually see where they'll start is, what a lot of people who maybe haven't been involved in employee resource groups or affinity groups is a lot of them are actually employee driven, right? So a group of employees sometimes will come together and then come to the organization, the HR department kind of usually is where this type of, a group sits and says, hey, we want to put together a group for menopause, right? Or women in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace or caregiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Navigating caregiving as an employee here at XYZ
Right.
company. And so it often becomes employee driven. And so that's usually a relatively simple add to an organization because there's not it's not like it's compensated outside of work. They might give a
Right.
little bit of budget for meetings and things like that. So I usually see that's probably the easiest way for them to say yes. But I do think that the future is going to be, and a little bit about my background, right? So I spent over 20 years in healthcare, but the last 10 years or so of my career, I was in employee benefits design, employee benefits committees, right? So I was in that space. And so what organizations do look at is they kind of look at what are the biggest pain points for our employee population. And I talk to a lot of folks who are in the employee benefits space, either in organizations or brokers, right? Because brokers are often how these are brought to organizations. And I do think there's a lot more conversation around it. And so they're looking for tools that help to support, you know, women with menopause, right? What sorts of, is it an app? Is it a rider? Is it
Mm-hmm.
an additional benefit of some sort? Same thing in the caregiver space. So we have a long ways to go, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think that organizations are starting to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, it's going to be an employee benefit often is how it might come. And it might look like something we're Tumbleweed. We're a digital platform with, AI agents to help support them. Others are, it's an insurance policy where maybe I buy a little bit of extra time away from work. Right. And so I think it's going to look different in different ways, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not there yet. But I am starting to see the shift in the last probably 12 to 18 months where they are starting to be like, hey, what do we do and how do we solve for this?
Right. Well, and it can look a lot of different ways. It can look like having the conversation. It can look like just
Yep.
acknowledging it. It can look on a
Yep.
micro level with the manager. It can look on a
Yeah.
macro level with
Yep.
offering a benefit and things like Tumbleweed.
Hmm.
And we'll talk about more about that in a second because I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's remarkable because across the board of all the different benefits, you have employees that cross the spectrum, whether it is a young employee,
Yep.
and maybe he's starting a single young employee
Yep.
starting a family, kids. Now we're talking about elder care and retirement,
Yep.
and so the offering of benefits and packages and things out there hits different people at different times. And I know for you all, I mean, a lot of it is it is across the board. It can be things like the important documents and all, but it's also
Yep.
end of life,
Yep.
planning as well,
Yep.
like your wills and your
Exactly.
insurance policies and things
Yep.
like that. Um, I want to go back to this idea of conversation in the workplace
Hmm.
for a second.
Okay.
What do you suggest that people do, or how are some good ways to start a conversation with an employer if you're having a caregiving situation? Because again, people are so reluctant to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your earlier point, there is sometimes some fear that if I share that I'm a caregiver outside of work, is this going to stagnate my career?
Hmm.
Or are they going to be fearful of giving me more work for growing my position? Right. So, in a perfect world, I think that try and talk to your leader, whomever that is, the next person you report into, manager, supervisor, director, VP, kind of doesn't matter title wise. If in the situation you don't feel comfortable or maybe the relationship is not that strong, go to HR or employee relations,
Hmm.
right? That's what they're there for. They are there for some of these. I don't know where to have this conversation or how to have it. I want my leader to be aware because, maybe my parent is battling dementia. And so just I'm having to maybe once a month take them to their doctor's appointments, or we're getting ready to transition them into assisted living or memory
Right.
care. Right. And so it's like, how do we have the conversation? Because I do think that with anything, when we as leaders, and I think about myself as a leader, or even as having been an employee, we don't want to be like a leader and an employee don't need to know every single part of each other's life, right?
Right.
Sometimes they do, and that works, but I don't think that works in every situation. But I do think if it's let's say you were my boss, Bradley, and I said, hey, Bradley, my grandmother is battling mental illness, or, she's gone to cognitive decline. I'm sharing this with you because I'm a primary caregiver. And I just wanted you to know that if something were to happen, I want you to be aware that, hey, if I send you a note and say, hey, I'm going to need to adjust my lunchtime today,
Right.
or, hey, something came up, I'm going to need to shift my meetings around, so it's not a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that getting the conversation started is the first part. But what we're actually finding is for the organizations and leaders that are supportive of the family caregivers is that they're actually finding that those folks that are sandwiched, who are in the sandwich generation, they can juggle a lot
Oh,
because
right.
they're having to manage,
Yep.
maybe kids, family, a home, pets, a partner, a spouse, life itself, and
Mm-hmm.
now an aging person. And so if you talk about the people who can kind of be juggling everything, their cognition is better, they have
Mm-hmm.
better emotional intelligence,
Right.
it really actually makes them a stronger and more valuable employee,
Mm-hmm.
in the long run, because they bring so much lived experience to leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do think that there is kind of once you get to the other side of it, it actually really can be an asset for the employee and the organization from a leadership development perspective.
It's funny. It's like they say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. They're
Exactly. Oh
yeah,
yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Yes. They'll figure it
And
out.
I also think too. I mean, it's that works great in the perfect world, but it has to be
Yeah,
the right culture. And I think
absolutely.
that's because I know some people are going to watch this and look. I mean,
Yeah.
not to be. I am a pragmatic optimist. Okay, and so I think that I think this is the right approach. Um, will it be received that way every time? No, probably
No,
not.
no,
But
you're right.
that may not be the right situation for you either.
Yep.
And I think
I,
that's very important.
in the situation where that's not possible, non-supportive leader, or even sadly, a non-supportive organization,
Hmm.
those things are possible, right? What I won't do is just say, go find another job. It's not that easy, right?
No,
Maybe that doesn't make the most sense. Maybe
right.
you're earning a pension. Like there's so many what ifs. I've heard this in my career a lot of times and I'm like, that's not the right answer for everybody. So that's
Hmm.
not my advice. But my advice would be is, do you have someone you trust at work, right? There's kind of this term
Hmm.
of, do you have a best friend at work, right? Is
Right.
there someone you can confide in and say, I just need to talk to someone. Do you have 5 minutes? Or I don't know how to navigate this. What should I do? And if work is really not the place, there are a lot of support groups. And
Hmm.
to your earlier point, right now, our data shows about 85% of the family caregivers from a primary perspective right now are women. But I
Hmm.
think there are actually a larger percentage of men. They're just not talking about it. They
Yeah.
don't know how to talk about it. It's a little bit more uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And so there are actually pretty much across, at least here in the US, I'll speak of, right? And other countries that I've seen as well. But there are lots of, resource groups, there are programs, there are, coffee meetups that people can get engaged in. And I
Hmm.
wish I would have known that earlier when I was younger, because sometimes, to your point, I felt alone, I felt overwhelmed, and I was like, I don't even know who to go or talk to.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice just to have someone to be like, hey, this is what I'm navigating. I believe we're better together, right? So if we're having
Hmm.
conversations with people who are further along in the journey, or maybe even in the same exact spot we are, and like, oh, I tried this, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Right.
So find your person or persons that you feel like you can lean on,
Hmm.
especially if you don't have that support at work, because work is such a huge chunk of our lives. And so
Yeah.
we need support somewhere.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that advice. And I think what's interesting is one reason I feel so strongly about this particular topic, advanced adulting, it, it runs the gamut. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all the things that hit us at midlife or beyond
Yeah.
that we never really were prepared for or didn't expect. And, it might be everything from a divorce or,
Yeah.
your finances or your own self, your own identity.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you that menopause is one of them too, but
Yeah.
caregiving for sure. And what I love about this and the advanced adulting topics is caregiving is an equalizer. And what I mean by that is, look, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter your background, your race,
Yeah.
your religion, your
Yeah.
political affiliation, your
Yeah.
education, anything. There are people across the board who are experiencing this, and it hits everybody a little differently.
Yeah.
Some people have more or different resources to deal with it. But I think that's important too. This is not something that, can money grease the skids? Sure, on dang near anything. But this is such a bigger thing than just throwing dollars at it, because it
Yeah.
is a physical and emotional
Yes.
toll on everything.
Yes. Well, and I think to your point too, absolutely right. Money is helpful in a lot of ways, but money isn't going to make the process any easier to watch a parent slowly
Hmm.
deteriorate or go through cognitive decline. That's
Hmm.
not going to save you. Maybe you can afford, more therapy and more
Right.
resources, but that's not going to change the lived experience. There's nothing you can do other than just to live through it.
Right.
And I think the other thing too is that I was thinking about as we were talking is I think about my own journey in this space. And although I just realized recently I was a caregiver, I've been a caregiver for others. I was very involved in kind of the end of life and after death experience with some family and friends. And I've looked back on why some of that is, and I think a little bit is for better or for worse. There's a psychological term called parentification. And so I was what they call a parentified child. My parents are very young. My mom was a single mom most of that time. And so I often had to step into a parenting style, even with my mom. And
Hmm.
so for me, this has been a very natural journey as she's been aging and other people in my circle, grandparents, friends have been aging. So for me, it's actually been more comfortable. But when I talk to a lot of our customers and even a lot of people just in the community, that role reversal is one of the hardest things that
Hmm.
people go through.
Yeah.
Is it's like, oh, I feel like I'm my parents' parent or I'm
Hmm.
my grandparents' parent. And so that's something where I think I really kind of was thinking about as you were just sharing that is I think that's one of the hardest things. And you're right. Stepping into that role does not care where in the world you sit, how much money you have, who
Nope.
you are, what gender you are. It just is what it is.
Yeah. That's and from people I've talked to, that parentification is, parenting the parent is
Yep.
one of the hardest things. I had Jennifer
Yeah.
Levin on the podcast, and she's author of Generation Care. I'm talking about the
Hmm.
millennial dilemma
Yeah.
of this, and she tells a story about her father. And here she is starting her career, 20s, 30s, and watching him go through Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And that right there, and I've heard this from so many other people, is seeing this parent or person who had been vibrant, had been strong, had been independent, and suddenly that decline, and you have to step in. That's a rough one to, not only for
Yeah.
you, for that
But for
person,
them
but to
too.
witness
Yeah.
that. And I think a lot of people, we've we know several people whose parents have recently, or family members have recently had strokes, and we forget too. I think this is a tough part as the child, the adult child, as frustrating it is for you. You got to know how frustrating it is for them, because
Yep.
they're in their skin. They're
Yep.
going through this and not able to do these things. And I know that sometimes, adult children and caregivers, we want to fix things, so
Yeah.
it's like, I'm going to
Hmm.
jump in there and I'm going
Yep.
to manhandle this situation and do things while they're in the room. We're there almost thinking of them as like a third party, rather than, hey,
Yep.
they're this is
Yep.
their life you're playing with and dealing with here as well.
Yep. Yeah. That's such a great point. And I think you know, it's a little bit different. My grandmother, who I'm very close with on my father's side, she's still living, and she's had a number of surgeries recently that have really slowed her down.
Hmm.
But she shared with me probably 2 or 3 years ago that one of the hardest things about aging for her has been in my mind, I feel like I'm 40,
Right.
but my body is almost 80. And so I can't move as fast. I can't do things the way I used to be able to. And she said that's been one of the most painful parts of aging is, just having even family members or even just the broader community kind of push and shove and, be exasperated around them. And it's like,
Hmm.
hey, I get you're annoyed. I'm annoyed too. I want to move
Right.
faster. I'm just going as fast as I can. And that's
Hmm.
no cognitive decline, right?
Nope.
So when you're thinking about a stroke or some of these other things, it really is hard. But really, as much as we can, try and ask them, how can I help you? What's most effective? Like,
Hmm.
because I think we still want agency, right? They still want agency. Even if they're slow, it's like, hey, I know it takes me 10 minutes to put on my shoes. I'm going to make it up, right? But you
Hmm.
know what? I actually want to do that because the only way I'm going to be able to live this new life is to be able to get used to doing it. And so I think
Hmm.
often we do out of discomfort or pain or maybe even frustration, we want to quickly just jump in there and do it. Here, I'll put on your shoes for you, right? And it's done. But that's
Yeah.
not really necessarily helping them. Now, if they can't, that's different. But I do
Right.
think, to your point, they are still human, right? They are still there and they want to be valuable and add to the world. So yeah, it's a
Well,
tough
yeah,
space.
in a case of where there's no cognitive decline, I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
like they're a third person here. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's that is a tough one because you're right. In our mind, you know, I've told the story before, but not recently. I was out and about, and I came home, and I said, "Oh, I see." I was referencing a group of what I said. Oh, there's a bunch of old guys over there. Okay,
Okay.
well, they were in their 70s,
Yep.
and she goes, "Hey, well, hold up, you're an old guy now." You're an old guy to a lot of people, and I'm 59, and you think
Yeah.
about that, and you think, yeah, in my head, I'm not old. Okay, to
Yeah.
someone my kid's age, I am
Yeah.
a fossil,
Yep.
and it's just I think I saw something that said we think of people. There's a 20-year gap. We think people 20 years older than us as older
Mm,
or as old.
yeah.
That is the
Yeah.
differentiator right there is 20 years. And I think the same might be true as in how we view ourselves. Because okay, outside of the fact that my knees creak, yeah, I could mentally think and feel I'm about 40. Okay,
Yep.
but it's interesting how we view ourselves. Perception's an interesting thing.
It absolutely is. Well, and it's interesting that you shared too that it's kind of that 20-year, which makes
Hmm.
sense. It's kind of like a generational difference, right? That's
Hmm.
about the average of a generational difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Um, One more thing about conversations, and we've moved into talking about family dynamics.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one with this, not just with the person you're caring for, but if there's siblings involved or other family members. Um, eh, communication solves a lot of problems in any situation, but it can
Yeah.
mess it up badly in one like this.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts or suggestions about how to really have this conversation, not only with the person you're caring for, but with
Mhm.
family members?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start with the kind of, family first, and then I'll think about conversations with our aging person. I think it's never too soon to start having the conversation. It really isn't. And I think every family has family dynamics. Some siblings, some family members like each other, others don't.
Right.
It's just that's the reality. We are humans, right? We may be born into the same family, but that doesn't mean that we like each other that much, right? But I do think that I will share with myself most of my life, I felt like I had to do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And although I have a very large family but split between divorce. It's a very kind of very interesting makeup, which is for another conversation. But my two younger sisters on my mom's side, they've stepped up in different ways at different points in time. But I always, as the eldest and as someone who had always leaned into being a caregiver, I was always afraid to ask for help and I didn't know what to say. But then honestly, I'll be very candid with you in the audience. I held resentment. I held resentment to my mom and I held resentment with my siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And I've since realized that that's actually a lot of it's on me, right? Because they didn't know how or in what ways to help. And so for me, what I've realized is when my mom is in a good place or when our parents or grandparents are in a good place, that's actually the best time to have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, how are we as these people are aging going to show up to support them? Even if we are dispersed across the country or around the world, how are we going to show up to support our person?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one of us is better with the hard conversations.
Right.
Maybe another is like, oh, I'm a financial person. I can take care of the bills and the budgeting. Or maybe it's someone who's great in healthcare who's like, you know what, I can take them to their appointments or I can follow up with physicians. But I do think that start talking, having those conversations now. And it's not just siblings. Sometimes it's siblings and a parent. who maybe
Right.
is a little bit younger or who has better cognition. Maybe it's an aunt. I mean, just start having these conversations now, sooner
Hmm.
rather than later, because I won't speak for every primary family caregiver. And I'm saying primary because the primary is one usually takes on the lion's share of the
Right.
work. But I do hear often that resentment, that frustration, it really comes out. And when we're already exhausted, worn out, and often burnt out, it just exacerbates a situation.
Hmm.
So have the conversations now.
Well, that makes total sense. And about on everything, the resentment piece, I totally get, but when you're in the middle of it, you
Yeah.
don't see it. You don't. But when you
No,
step
no.
back and you realize,
Yeah.
the thing I came to understand is everyone has different skill sets. Everyone helps in
Yep.
different ways.
Yep.
Everyone, even within a family,
Yep.
processes things very differently.
Yep.
And they're not going to be able. Your sibling may not be able to help or handle it like you do, but
Hmm.
they have something else. And if you understand, you allow them to do that and let them sit with that is, because some people just going to stroke the check. Okay,
Yep.
I get it, but you can't be resent. If they're
Yep.
doing that and that's all they can do, you can't resent them because they're not in the throes of it. You're experiencing something very different, you know.
Yep.
But I think that's a big thing. The planning piece and having that conversation. Boy, if I have a regret, it was that with my late
Yeah.
mother, because my sister and I had conversations, but we didn't have conversations that mattered or moved the
Mm.
needle.
Yeah.
That was the biggest part. And by the time some of these people are seeing this, we may be coming up on the holidays. So
Yeah.
that's the time when a lot of people encounter these things. A lot of
Hmm.
people will talk about these things. They'll go home Thanksgiving and they'll see mom and dad. They only see them 2 or 3 times a year. And
Yep.
it says,
Hmm.
holy crap, can you believe this situation? We have to do something, but you don't do anything.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that was my situation with my sister for a couple of years leading into it. It was like, oh man, but it's uncomfortable. It's not
It
something
is
you want to talk
uncomfortable.
about. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a big thing. And so what happens is you all your choices are now. All your
Hmm.
choices are ahead of time, but people don't plan, they don't think about that ahead of time. And suddenly you are in a crisis situation and your options are limited and you have
Yep.
to deal with something. And it's a very different dynamic then.
Yes. I mean, it's the reactive nature versus proactive nature, right? When you're
Mm-hmm.
having to react to something because it's like, oh my gosh, there's nothing, but now we have to jump in, and the sad thing about with our aging population is sometimes that means we've missed conversations about maybe final wishes
Right.
or things they want to achieve before they come to their final days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because without having the conversation, sometimes we don't know it. And so, I'll share a little bit about what I found are some best practices in conversation, and everyone has their own idea, right?
Sure.
But I will say that I've talked to a lot of folks, and I've had these conversations for many years now in kind of my own journey. And one of the ones where I identified that I thought I was being helpful was, hey Graham, as you're getting older, like, what would you want to have happen to you? Oh, I know I'm old and I know I'm slowing down and I know you just
Mhm.
want me gone. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah,
Right. I have two grandmothers,
they
right?
become
One is
martyrs.
very pragmatic and one is very emotional. So it's very different conversations. And the one who is very emotional, I was like, no, Graham, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying when your time comes, what do you want? I don't even know.
Right.
Right. And I'm a secondary primary caregiver. I want to know these things. And so with her, what I found was actually the conversation was better when I made it about myself and my own mortality. And I leaned into things I was already seeing in my daily life. Like I had a conversation with her after one of my coworkers, who's a little bit older than I, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it was like, oh my gosh, like she's only got probably about 18 months to live. And it really made me start to think about my mortality and what are the things I want to achieve and I want to do. And it allowed her to start to share her perspective in a
Mm-hmm.
softer way, which has allowed me to start being like, okay, got that. Okay. Right. So that's what worked in that situation. In the situation with my other grandmother, it was much more pragmatic. It was, what's most important to you? What do you want to have happen? What's hey, there's still some gaps. You've not said if you want to be
Mm-hmm.
cremated or buried. Where are you at with that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I'm in this space, right? I actually went to the first annual body composting conference, which
Sounds
is
like a great
natural,
time.
right? It actually was very, very interesting, but it's
Okay.
essentially natural organic reduction, which basically means it's a process by which our bodies break down naturally, and our remains can be used for nutrients for the earth, right? And they use it, when our body breaks down, it sounds like a disgusting process, but it's actually very natural. And so I actually, when I went to that conference, my grandmother, who's very pragmatic, she's like, that sounds disgusting. And what's interesting now is when I've talked to her about it and I've shared, that's actually what she wants to have done now.
Turn
But
me
it
into
took
a
her about
tree.
2 years. Exactly. That's what it is, right? Turn me into a tree, go, I love the mountains, like put me in a mountain scene or something like that,
Hmm.
right? Um, but I think that the conversations do look different based on where the person is, what their comfort level is. But in general, I do say if you're not sure where to start, find a honest, natural situation that allows you to have a conversation. Someone who lost a parent recently or a
Right.
grandparent, share how it's making you feel, and then
Hmm.
see how they respond.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in just a second, but I want to thank our sponsor, Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed's a simple, secure online hub where you can organize everything: legal documents, insurance, passwords, contacts, even personal wishes. Look, chaos doesn't wait until you're ready. One phone call can change your entire world. When that happens, the last thing you want to do is dig through files, passwords, and piles of paper. Tumbleweed makes end of life planning and caregiving while they're here simple. Secure digital tools, guided checklists, one place to store everything your family needs. Tumbleweed helps families organize important records, capture wishes, and preserve life stories. So caregivers and loved ones can focus on what matters most, being right there in the moment where they are. It's about making hard moments easier for you and the people you love. Get 6 months free when you sign up and use code ADULTING exclusively for advanced adulting followers. Learn more and begin planning at tumbleweedplan.com. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they'll start to share information. But the biggest thing that I've learned, and I share this in any conversation I can, is absent of you were just given a diagnosis that means you have to make some very rapid decisions.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a one-time conversation.
Okay.
This is conversations that should be happening for probably months and years
Mm-hmm.
over time. And because this is a lot. When we think about mortality, if I had to go through and be like, here's the 150 things I want to have happen, my cognition is going to be overloaded, and I'm probably going to be hyper emotional and can't handle it. So we need
Oh,
to have these conversations incrementally, little by little, bringing people together, right? I've heard mixed results on the holiday thing. I think the holidays are helpful when we all come together, especially for those of us who live kind of
right.
not near our families, but generally not on the actual holiday day event. Maybe
Right.
like the day after or the breakfast on the
That's the turkey. What do
27th.
you want to be cremated,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
No, I know. I say that about the holidays because it's one of those things where, if especially as distributed as we are
Yep.
now,
Yep.
and you see them and you haven't seen them
Yeah.
in a while, that's when you see market decline,
Yes.
and that's when my experience and
Yep.
the conversations with so many others. Boy, you're burning up the phones afterwards with your
Yep.
siblings. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, can you believe this? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend having it, as your
Yeah.
opening presents, but it's a time of introspection, and
Absolutely.
awareness, most definitely. One other thing, and I love how you mentioned that about having those conversations about plans,
Yeah.
okay, with your loved one. But I think, and depending on the type of individual, your grandmother example, I also know that sometimes if you bring it back to you, you know,
Mhm.
they want to help you. Everybody wants to help their child, right?
Yep.
Still, even no matter how old they are,
Yep.
and like unless you've been through it or seen someone go through it,
Yep.
the mad scramble, the everything hits the fan
Yep.
situation when someone passes and they don't have everything together. And I'm not talking necessarily about estate planning or
Yeah.
wills or all that. I mean, just it can be the basics of, hey, do you want to be buried or cremated? What's
Hmm.
going to happen? Where do my things go? Where is stuff? Where's my passport? All of these the logistical things that we deal with. I mean, oh well, it's in an envelope in the back drawer over here.
Yeah.
Well, good luck finding that and deciphering
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people, a lot of older people, younger people too, it's something that we were pushed down the road, or we
Hmm.
think you kind of, for lack of a better term, you kind of half-ass it. Well, I have a
Yep.
will,
Yep.
do you? But you did it 15 years ago,
Exactly. Hmm.
or insurance, so you don't know
Yep.
what's it. And so that's one thing I love about what you do with
Thank you.
Tumbleweed is it, it's more than just, hey, here's a box. It's a
Hmm.
digital place
Yep.
where you can go to have everything, not just the important stuff that we're talking about, the documents that you need,
Yeah.
because when it is emotional, you're not thinking about
Yep.
it, you know. But it's plans and everything. Tell us a little bit how you morphed into this.
Yeah. So, um, I lost 6 people in the course of 6 years. 5 of the 6 were unexpected. You know, and what I worked in healthcare, and I think that my experience in healthcare and having been a family caregiver was why I often jumped in very early in these situations, but also why I got called a lot to help
Mhm.
navigate healthcare related questions, even Medicare questions and things like that, because I worked in healthcare, so I understood it from that lens. Um, and what's interesting was in 2022, I took a 4-month road trip across the US and realized very early on I was holding on to grief. My parents are very young, so I was very close with my grandparents. And my grandfather passed away while I was in grad school. I didn't get to go to his funeral because his funeral was on our final presentation day. And so I missed it. And my grandmother passed during COVID. And so we're still in lockdown. And I really didn't process the grief in those situations. I also worked in healthcare during COVID. I was in administration, but we were working crazy hours trying to keep everything together. Um, and so it wasn't until 2022 when I started to reflect on those experiences. And really what I realized was, how's there not more technology and support with aging and death? That's really kind of the reflection that I had. I had no idea I was going to eventually start Tumbleweed, which is a digital platform for end of life planning and caregiving for an aging person. Did not know that, but that's what came out of that journey, because
Mhm.
I looked out there and I was like, this is a problem. And with our aging population and the baby boomers, like, we got to do something here. And so that's really kind of what started the platform. Where we for initially looked at was, and this was through many conversations at this point, probably now a few hundred conversations with different potential customers and partners, was a digital repository, essentially a digital file cabinet of legal, financial, insurance, and then what I call the softer side of things, which are wishes and stories. I want a celebration of life on Lake Michigan. Invite these 5 people. Don't invite my brother. We don't talk anymore, and play these songs. Right. It's
Right.
kind of those are the things a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about, but then no one ever writes it down. And then to your point, something happens and it's like,
Yeah.
what
You
did they
forgot, and
want?
siblings are back
Yeah.
and forth. Yeah.
Exactly. And then chapters about important memories and, things they want to achieve, or even words of wisdom to future generations, right? Like, I'm
Mhm.
Paul Richardson, and here's a little bit about me, and here's what I want all of our future generations to know about my experience, right? So we created a place to capture that. That's where we started. Fast forward, we recently launched our agentic AI support, which is CC, which
Mhm.
stands for Care Coach. And that's really a 24/7 built by human experience, supported by AI, to allow folks to have conversations. We bring them insights, education, resources, connect them to legal, financial. Even in some situations, people actually want a care coach who is a live
Mhm.
human. We can connect them to those resources kind of along the pathway. And that's where, for us, it really allows folks to actually get more support that's simple and more than just going to Google and putting in what do I do if and when. This is actually
Hmm.
built by our customer experience and customer journeys, where it's kind of like, here's the things I went through, here's the things I needed, here were the
Hmm.
questions I had. And we can kind of help to anticipate some of those components along the journey when we identify where they're at in either their own aging journey or supporting an aging person.
Hmm.
And that's really been a huge opportunity. We're seeing a lot of lift with that, and it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing thing that you're doing with technology for a problem that everybody has. It is.
Yeah.
We started off this conversation. It's one of the equalizers, and everyone's going to experience it at some point.
Yeah.
And it's people like you and who are using new tools to just make life easier and better for everybody, for families and their loved ones. So it's good stuff.
Yeah,
Hey,
absolutely. I
also,
mean, that's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, honestly, I only realized this probably about a year ago. I was like, oh, I've been building Tumbleweed in CC for 30 years. It's kind of like I'm solving, my own pains
Right.
from 30 years ago. I'm validating it with the world, right? It's not like I'm just building something for me, but it really came from my own lived experience and frustration and exhaustion and pain,
Hmm.
where I was like, oh my gosh, if I would have had a tool, even
Yeah.
if it's on my phone, I could have went to with a quick question like, what do I do next? Well, here are the next 3 steps you might want to consider. Oh, okay, perfect.
Right. I think that's so important. And one of the cool things I like about people in this space, like yourself, and anybody watching this will be able to tell too, is this is not a cash grab. And what I mean by
No.
that is there's a lot of people who are, lots of industries, a lot of sectors, a lot of people using AI or technology or anything
Yeah.
because they see an open market. Um, and what so many founders in this space have done is they've lived it,
Yeah.
and there's a cliche out there, but it's basically you write the book that you'd want to read. You build the company or
Yeah.
service or product that you would want to use, or you serve
Yep.
who you used to be
Yep.
5 years ago. And
Yep.
that this is a case of exactly what we're talking about. You've needed this, and a lot of people need it. And there's going to be information below in the description, but anybody that's watching this too, if you would like to experience what we're talking about and use Tumbleweed, you can visit tumbleweedplan.com and also use code adulting, and you'll receive a 6 months free, right, to be
Yep.
able to
Yep.
use it with code adulting. So thank you, Paul, for that, and I definitely want to take you up on that. So, um,
Absolutely.
what are you most excited about right now? It could be anything. It could be
Oh, wow.
anything, business, professional, sports. Who knows? What are you most excited about right now?
I'll share two things. One is I think that, because holidays came up, I always enjoy the holiday season. I just do, for better or for worse. I grew up in a very large family, and as a child, not so much as an adult, but as a child, everyone was kind of on their best behavior around the holidays, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
That was kind of the time where people showed up as their best self. So I always enjoy, especially Christmas and Thanksgiving, um, around the new year. So I'm excited about the holiday season.
Hmm.
I think what I'm also really excited about too is, to your point about a cash grab, is when I was building Tumbleweed and looking at how are we going to bring this to the world, and my big thing was a lot of folks are in this space, yeah, we can have a monthly subscription like so many other platforms, but my thing is we're strapped for cash. And I was like, what are other ways where we could get this paid for to where it's actually free or more affordable to the end user, to the
Hmm.
person who's navigating the pain? And so, actually, for us, we've started partnering with insurance companies, because insurance, life insurance, and even health insurance in some other
Hmm.
spaces, they're excited because we're providing more support services that they can't, right? When you think about a
Right.
life insurance policy, it's a piece of paper. Now, maybe it's a
Yes.
digital piece of paper, but there's no experience with it. You
Right.
just hope it's there when you need it, right? That it provides that life benefit
And you won't
for you
know.
if
Yeah.
and you won't know exactly. And so we found a lot of opportunity in working with insurance companies to where they're paying for it to enhance the experience of their policyholders and their members. And so for me, like my ideal state is anybody who needs Tumbleweed could get it free of access through their insurance company or their employer if and when they need it, right? Because my thing is, we all have, I think that the stat right now is about everyone has about $400 a month in subscriptions on average. I don't want to have to add to that plate. So what can we do to find another pathway to get the support people need that they don't actually have to sign on the dotted line to pay for it? So I'm excited about that. We're seeing a lot of opportunity and growth. I'm sitting actually in a hotel room from the largest insurance conference in the United States, ITC, and lots of fantastic conversations, and they really care about this space. So that's exciting to me.
Well, good. If we can have it where employers are really,
a
lot of people give lip service to, hey, we're going to help our employees, but this is something you can actually do that's tangible.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Good stuff. All right. So you have a time machine, and I know we're changing it up a little bit. You have a time machine. You get to go back 20 years, and you're going to go have coffee with your younger self, your early, 20-something self. Then what would you tell your younger self about it being an advanced adult, about midlife and beyond?
Ask for help. Whether it's my siblings, whether it's coworkers, whether it's other family or friends, I've had to learn. I call it the art of asking, right? It's kind of the art of asking for help. But I do think that if I could go back 20 years and tell my 22-year-old self, stop trying to do and start asking, because so much of my life was in service, and I don't regret that whatsoever, but it did burn me out, and I did have to navigate some pain and resentment. And I think if I had learned that it's okay to feel like you need help, it's really just getting comfortable with asking. So I think that's one thing I would ask. The other thing I would tell myself is it's actually never too early to start planning for the future, And so I think that I am seeing a little bit of an uptick with the younger generation, recent college graduates who are actually more excited about life insurance. At 22, it's like, I'm not going to die anytime soon. So yeah, that's great. My company gives me something, but I don't need to add extra things. But honestly, now working in this space, starting at 22 means you can have a very affordable, you can have a very inexpensive policy or policies that have a lot of value in 20, 30, and 50 years. So, just some things I would have done a little bit different.
To know any better. I wish someone would sit down and get, teach you the real stuff. Yeah,
exactly. And it's the real stuff. It's the things that we don't know that's coming. But the reality is, I know there's a lot of focus right now on the sandwich generation, and it does look very different because now we've got mostly dual working households, right? So it's just kind of this consolidation of pressure in the way I think about it. But every generation is going to experience this. It's just going to look different.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
There's always going to be older people that are older than you that need help.
And one day that older person is going to be you. Exactly.
Yep.
Good. Paul Richardson, thank you very much. Good man doing good work. Thanks for being on Advanced Adulting.
Thanks, Bradley.